Nostalgia Trip, Part 6, by Icydice.
I'm back, and I've got a lot to say. I don't know what the hell I just went through. My mind is a clusterfuck of disorganized thoughts right now, but I need to type them out as soon as I can while my memory is still fresh. I'm sorry if I come across as incoherent in this. I'll try to be as clear as possible. When I booted up the game and entered the world, my character spawned in front of the school, right where I left off. Up to that point, I had been blindly traveling, but this time was different. This was no longer just a nostalgia trip. I fully intended to search for more information about the true nature of the game. The only lead I had was the house I stumbled into from entry 1 of my blog. It had been the only occupied home in the town, and that couldn't have been a coincidence. As I made my way back towards town, I heard the familiar sound of footsteps trailing behind me. How typical. No matter where I went, he followed. Their vision fell upon my character as I entered the house. None of the character models had moved since I last visited the place. They all stood still like statues. Only their eyes shifted while I traversed each room. If I'm honest, I paid them very little attention. My mind defaulted to blurring out their presence. I wasn't exactly sure what I was looking for. I hoped the house contained a clue for me. I needed a sense of direction as I progressed through the game. Using the keypad to highlight every object in sight, I attempted to interact with everything I could. I clicked on every bookshelf, every desk, and every drawer. Nothing, I found, was of use to me. I felt utterly defeated and pessimistically suspected that searching the house was a fruitless endeavor. As I approached the door to leave, I had an idea. I turned and approached the model of Mr. O that had been following me. When I interacted with him, a text box popped up above his head.
Since we're here, do you want to go downstairs, Jeremy?
This confused me. I had searched the entire house at that point, and I knew there was no basement. I selected the yes option, and Mr. O spun around and promptly walked forward. My character automatically followed him. We had entered a cinematic cutscene within the game. I followed Mr. O into his bedroom, and he approached his bed. I watched as he slid the bed to the side, revealing a hole in the floor where a ladder stood. Mr. O stepped onto the ladder and descended. I knew for a fact that I had tried interacting with that bed before. Nothing happened when I attempted to shift it. As my character climbed down the rungs of the ladder, I remembered my previous play session. When I had been trapped inside of the locked room, I was only able to exit after approaching Mr. O. I had found myself in a similar situation. There were certain locations in the game that were impossible to access or exit without the help of Mr. O. The first time I encountered that situation, I dismissed it as unimportant. As it happened a second time, I began to suspect that it was an intentional game mechanic. When I finally found myself at the bottom of the ladder, I was alone in a large room. A header dropped down from the top of the screen and it read, Mr. O's basement. Something about the place struck me as familiar, but I couldn't place it at first. I simply felt a sense of déjà vu wash over me. It was a feeling which grew in intensity the longer I stayed inside of Mr. O's basement. Mr. O was waiting for me at the opposite end of the room. As I walked towards him, my character entered another cutscene. He stood against the wall with Mr. O standing directly in front of him. Mr. O withdrew a camera from his inventory and began snapping photos of my character. After a few moments, Mr. O set his camera down and approached me.
You did such a great job, Jeremy. I'm so proud of you.
He turned towards the camera, facing me directly. He tilted his head and grinned. He was trying to directly communicate his glee, not to my character, but to me, the player. This continued for a couple of seconds before he faced my character once more. He proceeded to hand them something before leaving the area. As I opened my inventory, I realized he had given me a cookie, as well as 25 gold coins. By that point, I was already weirded out by what had taken place. Why the fuck had Mr. O taken photos of me? Why did he reward me as well? I hardly had time to think about that, however, because that's when I noticed it. I had taken in the environment and realized that my character was surrounded by blank, white walls, which were similar in appearance to the ones I found in my DS camera roll. What the fuck? I felt sick to my stomach as a sense of pure dread set within me. I didn't want to continue. It all felt so incredibly wrong. I forced myself to carry onward, knowing in the back of my mind that stopping would do me no good. I wanted the satisfaction of knowing what was going on, regardless of what that knowledge entailed. I made my way across the room and towards the ladder. I ascended it and stepped out of the basement. Mr. O stood next to the hole in the floor, waiting for me. He quickly stepped towards me, and a dialogue bubble popped up above his head once again.
Jeremy, I need you to listen to me,
he began. He turned to face me directly once again.
When you love someone, Jeremy, you do anything for them, right? You take care of them. You make them happy, Jeremy. Remember, there's nothing wrong with making someone you love happy.
I just stared at the screen. Mr. O returned my gaze. His smile had vanished at that point. His typical jovial expression had been replaced with a stern look.
And it's okay to keep secrets to protect the ones you love, isn't it, Jeremy? You can keep everything between us, right?
I was given the option to respond to him. A text bubble appeared next to my character. An arrow pointed to the yes option. There was no other choice presented to me. I was not allowed to dissent, only to agree. I tried to move away from Mr. O, only to find that I couldn't. I was stuck. There was only one way forward, and it made my skin crawl. He wasn't asking me a question, he was giving me a command. I selected the yes option. Doing so caused Mr. O's smile to return, and I was finally able to move freely again. I didn't stick around. I forced my character to leave the house as quickly as possible. I snapped the DS shut and set it down beside me. When Mr. O told me not to tell anyone about him, it invoked something deep within my gut. It was the exact same feeling that overcame me whenever I thought of telling my mother about Mr. O's presence in the game. The exact same fucking feeling. I know what I said earlier about not jumping to hasty conclusions. I know I said that I know that maybe I'm contradicting myself here, but I don't care. I need to type my intuitive reaction to all this here, if only to reflect on it later. Although the overall vibe of the game had felt off to me since I began playing it, I couldn't have foreseen this. As I've replayed the game, the only purpose it serves so far is to remind me of him. The only characters in this game are him and I. It's as if the game is trying to tell me that I'm alone in this world, alone aside from being with him. Whenever I go anywhere, he follows. Whenever I go anywhere, he watches. He always watches. The game wants me to know that. It wants me to accept it. Hell, it's working, isn't it? As I go on, I pay less attention to his model following me. As I play, I take it for granted that he's staring at me constantly. It wants me to think that this is normal. Fuck, man. There's even an entire room in my character's house where he lives. He wants to get close to me. Whenever I need something, whenever I'm stuck and can't progress, I'm meant to go to him. I'm meant to be dependent on him, to view him as the solution to my problems. I know this all sounds insane, but it's honestly how I feel. It's as if the game is training me, for lack of a better term. It's controlling how I think, it's controlling how I feel, it's controlling how I behave. It's making me act the way he wants me to act. I don't fucking know, I'm kind of spitballing here. But is it really that much of a stretch? I don't feel like I'm speaking gibberish here. Please tell me I'm making sense. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's a perfectly innocent, reasonable explanation for all of this. If that's the case, it sure isn't fucking appearing that way. Or maybe I just need sleep. I've been up for far too long. Perhaps I don't want to rest because I'm afraid I'll face his torment in my dreams again. I'm sorry I've subjected you all to my ramblings. All I wanted to do was to take a break from my stressful life and travel back to simpler times. I never expected I would unleash this all upon myself. I'm not sure if I'll touch the game again. While I'd hate to have unanswered questions about the game and Mr. O, I'm not sure if continuing is worth it. This thing is really starting to fuck with my head. I understand my previous remarks about wanting to know about the game no matter what that entailed. I'm not sure how much conviction I hold regarding that attitude anymore. Nostalgia Trip was written by Icydice. Narration, editing, mastering, and original music by Abysme. Comprehensive links below. YouTube.com/Creepypasta is a collaborative channel. Please, subscribe if you want to follow our content. If you want to support the channel, please consider liking, commenting, and sharing this video with like-minded members of the community.